There are multiple great animes that have been shown before, but if you're familiar with anime in general, most of them don't get finished all the way through the end. So I read all Magi, which spans over 369 chapters, and decided to make a list. By the way, I will be taking all these characters at their strongest. Oh yeah, and if you haven't caught on by now, spoiler, so if you don't want to be spoiled for some reason, turn it off, but before you turn off, share the video. And probably might as well like since you're already here, you know what I mean? And before we get to the actual list, I want to start with some honorable mentions first. I already know I butchered half of these names, but I'm not Japanese, so please bear with me. The honorable mentions being Haku, Koen, Koime, Koha, Mew, Titus, Yuna, Judar, and all Sinbad's household vessels. But with them out the way, let's get to the list. Starting off the number 10 spot, Morgiana. Originally, I was going to put Yuna at this spot, given that since he is a Magi, he's basically has unlimited magic, which results in him pulling off some crazy attacks. Pretty powerful, in fact. He even is able to pull off some crazy stuff like copying Sinbad's lightning sword. But when I look at both Morgiana and Yuna's best feat, they both had their best feat against the same person, that being Arba. When Yuna was fighting her, yes, he did manage to pull off a lot of damage to her body, to the point where she even had to regenerate her body as a whole. But in her fight, she never went out against him fully. She only used swordsmanship, hand-to-hand combat, and the bare minimum magic. However, when Arba fought Morgiana and tried to do the same thing, she was getting whooped pretty bad, because Morgiana was physically stronger than her and faster than her. Arba was only able to beat Morgiana when she started using her magic, aka going full out. And in my eyes, that personally puts her over Yuna for me. And with that, let's get on to the number 9 spot, being Hakuryuu. Now if you've seen the anime, you know Hakuryuu acquired a gene which let him manipulate plants, or plant life for that matter. But if you're anime only, you don't know that he has acquired a nerd gene in a manga, becoming the third person in the series to have multiple genes. The second gene allows him to confuse people with sounds and visions. It sounds weak, but in his second fight against Alibaba, it shows how really strong the gene really is. When he does a full gen equip with his second gen, he has the ability to remove whatever he cuts to a different dimension, meaning that whatever was cut by this gen cannot be healed. Combine that with the fact that he can use both gen at the same time, make him a pretty strong character. Also the fact that he is a master spearsman and swordsman. Moving on to the number 8 spot is a character Hakuryuu actually beat, with that being Alibaba. But there's a reason why I put Alibaba over Hakuryuu, so pay attention to me real quick. Over the story, Alibaba has gained quite a few strengths, like one being his flame gene, Amon, which make Alibaba a threat to be reckoned with. Amon gives Alibaba not only the ability to manipulate fire, but also be immune to it. But this isn't even regular old fire, given the fact that Alibaba said that it can burn through anything, or almost anything. Like how it was so hard that Alibaba overwhelmed Hakuryuu with screen magic. If you don't know what a screen magic is, it's usually a gene user or a Magi/magician most powerful attack, most of the time used as a last resort, or if they want to just finish the fight quickly. Although near to the end of the story, he ended up being a master swordsman, even better than his master, Soraka, which he ended up besting in a one-on-one fight. But what really nailed the case for Alibaba being a despot is the ability that he gained post-death, which is hyper-concentration. This allows him to experience a single moment as if it was happening for all of eternity, which allows him to always be one step ahead of his opponent. Well, unless they heavily outspeed him, that is. That made a good enough case for Alibaba, so let's get on to the next spot before you get tired of hearing me talk, with number 7 being Sheba, or is it Sheba? Anyway, if you're anime only, it's no wonder you don't know who this character is, being she was only shown later in the manga as Aladdin's mother and the wife of King Solomon. Even though this character was only present for an arc or 2, she was pretty entertaining, considering her character development. If you're still watching, comment on if you want a video about this character or not. But besides that, let's talk about how strong this character really is. Sheba has a vast amount of magic, but her biggest claim to fame is her 8-headed barrier that uses to protect herself. Also, the barrier sprouts tentacle-like arm things that allows it to attack other people as well, making it one of the best defensive techniques in the whole manga. To be fair though, during the time she was alive, there was only like 3 magicians who outranked her, and with one of the magicians being the one we're finna talk about right now, the 6th place holder, Arba. Arba has some crazy feats throughout the whole story, given the fact that not only is she a magician, but also a swordsman. Even that fact, her battles are pretty crazy. Like how she beat up on Judar, Hakuryuu, and two master swordsmen with her magic, to the point where they had to turn her magic off just to stand a chance. But that didn't really matter since she continued to whoop on them until they found a way to beat them. Or beat her for that matter. Still, it was essentially a 4v1. Or like in her fight with Yuna, where not only did she beat him with the bare minimum, she showed some crazy feats as well. Like how she was still able to fight even with her skin burnt off. Or damn near impossible to kill. One reason being because she has infinite regeneration. That is because her real body is in another dimension hiding always. She also shown that when she gets serious, she doesn't mind putting out all the stops. Like when she summoned a whole army who was capable of using extreme magic to a high level. I would say the only downfall or weakness for Arba is that everyone who is left on this list can pretty much deal with her easily. Like the 5th place holder, Aladdin. It's funny because everyone on this list who's kind of rare. You can say Aladdin ranks the highest I ever. If you're wondering what I mean by that, I'll explain a little bit later. But for now, let's talk about why Aladdin holds this spot. That being a few reasons. For starters, like his mastery of his magic. In the beginning, it wouldn't have been a stretch to say that Aladdin was a volunteer magician. But that changed after the time skip where he's shown quite a few feats and greater control of his magic. Even better than most mages. Like how he utilized his mother's best technique, the 8-headed barrier. Which if you remember, this may be the second best defense technique in all of Magi. I say it's second because the first is Aladdin's ability that he got from his father, being the ability to manipulate the laws of physics, allowing him not only to redirect attacks, but redirect people too, like how he did in his fight against Arba. He has other incredible abilities too. I want to talk about something else, and that would be something else that he received from his father, being Solomon's wisdom. This allows him to look into the flow of the Ryu to become an omniscient being. By the way, if you don't know what an omniscient being is, it's a person who literally knows everything within the world. This is how he learned his father and mother technique despite them being dead long before Aladdin was born. This is one of the main reasons why I don't see Aladdin struggling with no one who's lower than him on this list. Moving on to the final 4, where everyone in the top 4 has been the guardian of the Sacred Palace at one point or another. Now, if you don't know what the Sacred Palace is, it basically allows you to become a god. Like how Ugo explained how he created everything, making him basically the author. Now that we had that established though, let's continue. Moving on to the number 4 spot, Solomon. Going off that, Solomon was the weakest out of the 4. If you're wondering how Solomon was the weakest despite having the power of a god, well, that's pretty easy. Throughout the story, it was showing that Solomon was a very selfish character. So after making a new world, Solomon decided to spread his power throughout the world, so that everyone would be equal, leaving him with the least amount of energy, or power for that matter. Speaking of which, if you're wondering why I never put the original god in here, it's because he did something similar to Solomon. But if you're curious where he would rank, it would be like one spot below Solomon himself. But moving on to that, let's get on to someone stronger, with the number 3 spot being Ugo. Despite Ugo being the guardian of the Sacred Palace for the longest, we only ever see him in 2 fights. But those fights are more than impressive. With the first one being versus Sinbad, with Sinbad only having his Jinn equipped. And this goes how you might expect it. Ugo hit Sinbad one time, damn near put him on life support. Then it shows that after Sinbad tried to attack Ugo, Ugo is completely immune to it. Then Sinbad charges at Ugo, where he gets burnt alive and killed, making a truly one-sided ass whooping. Then his other fight is immediately after this, being with David, aka Solomon's father, and Aladdin's grandfather. David actually succeeds in killing Ugo, and becoming the guardian of the Sacred Palace and celebrating, for all of 1 second before Ugo claps back. Yes, I know what you're probably thinking. David did become the guardian of the Sacred Palace, but Ugo became a god that succeeded David. Or exceeded. I know it's confusing, so I'm gonna break it down for you. There's basically a multi-layer structure when it comes to gods, meaning that there are levels to godhood. So even though yes, David became a god that can create infinite universes, Ugo replaced a god that was above that. Understand now? If you don't, just read this panel. With that, let's get to the final spot. Yes, final because it's a tie. And the tie spot for number 1 goes to David and Sinbad. I already explained the Sacred Palace, so knowing that, that's why I had these two at the same spot. because when Sinbad and David had their showdown, they kept changing the hierarchy, meaning that they was never really stronger than the other for long. And if you're wondering how both of these characters are above Ugo when he clapped both of them, it's because they exceeded his hierarchy, meaning that they became stronger than him. But that's pretty much the list. And if you made it this far, let me know what you would change, and let me know another anime that needs the top 10 strongest.